Hey boys and girls, so today we're going to be going over Unit 3, Lesson 4, which is rotations on the coordinate plane. Before you get started, just make sure that you guys are filling in your name at the top. All right, let's look at the do now. It says graph and state the coordinates of C prime, the image of C, if the ray used for the translation is ray BA. I'm going to go back and highlight what's important here. So the do now is asking us for two parts. We have to not only graph, but we also need to state the coordinates of C prime. So if I know that I'm moving along ray BA, again, I'm seeing the keyword ray. I know that that symbol up top, that little hat, represents a ray for ray BA. I'm going to do that with a translation. If you guys remember from lesson 3, a translation just moves or it slides objects around. So in order for me to slide point C so it can become C prime, I first have to identify where ray BA is going to be. So I'm going to draw in a ray from B to A with my ruler here. Okay. And now I'm going to ask myself, well, how do I move from B to A? Well, to get from B to A, I have to go 1, 2, 3 to the left, and then 1 down. So I'm going to just write that on the side. I have to go left 3 units, and then down 1 unit. So that's what I'm going to do to translate C so it can become C prime. So I'm going to go to the left 3 units, 1, 2, 3, and then down 1 unit. I'm going to plot my new point. I'm going to label it C prime, and I am good to go. Or am I? It says to graph, which I did, so I'm done with the first part, but it also says to state the coordinates, and this is how they get you. You've done all of this work, and sometimes we forget to state or write down what the coordinates of C prime would be. So C prime has the coordinates of x, y, and those would be -5, +4. Again, you start from the origin, -5, +4, and now we're done with the do now. All right, let's jump underneath for some vocab. So as I look here, the next word that we're going to add to our vocabulary list is orientation. So I'm going to highlight that for us. Orientation is just the ordering of the letters, okay? And the ordering of the letters, and we're going to start with the pre-image, right? Pre-game, beforehand. So this is what I'm starting with. The image or the game is where I'm ending up. So let's start that. Let's write that here. So this is where I'm starting. That's this keyword for pre-image. And this is where I'm ending up for my image. Okay? And again, I can rotate or I can look at the ordering of the letters. So that way they're either moving clockwise or counterclockwise. All right. The question says, given the following pair of figures, identify the rigid motion and state whether or not orientation is preserved. So let me highlight the question again. So it says, identify the rigid motion, and we have to say whether or not orientation is preserved. If I look at the first example on the left here, well, here's A prime. Here's B prime. Here's C, here is C prime. I can see that each vertex is being moved up and to the right, up and to the right, up and to the right. When I slide something, that's called a translation. So if I'm identifying the rigid motion, it would be a translation. Now I have to state whether or not orientation is preserved. Well, orientation is the order of the letters. So the way you're going to identify if it's preserved or not is by drawing little arrows in alphabetical order like this. A moves to B, A prime moves to B prime. Now you have to ask yourself, am I turning back time or am I following the order of a clock? If you're having trouble with this, you can always think of a real clock. A is at the top, maybe that's like the 12. B is at the bottom, I'll think of that as a 6. If I'm moving from 12 to 6, that means I'm turning back time. That would be counterclockwise. Same thing up top, 12 to 6. I'm turning back time. That would be counterclockwise. Since I'm moving the same direction on both, I would say that orientation is preserved. All right? If orientation was not preserved, then these guys would be moving in different directions. Since they're both turning back time, they're counterclockwise, I know it was preserved, they're the same. Let's look at the next example over here. So again, it's asking what's the rigid motion? Well, here's my pre-image, because this is where I'm starting, and here is my image, this is where I'm ending up. It has those prime symbols on it, okay? I can see here that if I take my pre-image and turn it, it will look like my image. So when I turn something, that's called a rotation. And again, I have to test if the orientation is preserved or not. I'm moving from A to B and from A prime to B prime. So now I got to ask myself, am I moving clockwise or counterclockwise? Well, if I look at the pre-image, this would be counterclockwise. I'm turning back time. If I look over here at the image, again, I'm turning back time. This would be counterclockwise. So since they're both moving counterclockwise, I know that orientation is preserved in a rotation as well. And then last but not least at the bottom, I can see here that my pre-image is up top, A, B, C, and my image is down below, A prime, B prime, C prime. Here's A prime, B prime, C prime. So I can see that this is a reflection, and I can tell that it's actually a reflection over the x-axis. Okay, this is getting just to be a little bit more detailed, but it would be up 1 for A, down 1 for A prime. Up 4 for B, down 4 for B prime. Okay, so this is a reflection. Let's fill that in. It's the rigid motion that we're dealing with. And if I have to look at the orientation, it's nice because they already drew the arrows in here for us. So I'm moving from A to B, A prime to B prime. Now, if I look at the pre-image, I can see this is clockwise. I'm moving in the order of a clock, all right? If I look underneath, this is counterclockwise. I'm turning back time. Since these are different, right? I have clockwise up top, I'm gonna just put a little C, and I have counterclockwise down below. I'm gonna put a little CO. These are different, so I know that orientation is not preserved. Orientation is not preserved. Okay, the order of the letters is different. So when I want to fill in this blank at the bottom, orientation is not preserved when the order of the lettering is reversed. It's different. Okay, let's move on to the next page. Okay, vocabulary, even more. So this whole lesson, as a reminder, is on rotations. We're practicing how to rotate. I know that yesterday was translating, right? That was one rigid motion. Today we're doing rotations for a different rigid motion. Let's start off by going over our key words. A rotation is a rigid motion that turns a figure about a fixed point. And that point that I'm turning it around is called a center of rotation. Okay, so that's one key word. And then our other vocabulary word is the angle of rotation. The angle of rotation is the number of degrees that we rotate. So just like before, you can see here that we have two examples. We have a clock that moves clockwise, just like how it would in real life. And then we have a clock that moves counterclockwise. I'm turning back time. It goes the opposite direction. This is important if we want to be successful in today's lesson. So as we look at the examples, it says given point A on the coordinate plane, graph and label A prime after the given rotation. Okay, I'm going to start off by just labeling this point that's plotted for me as A, because the directions are telling me given point A, here is A. I have to graph and label, let's highlight that, make sure we finish this question completely. Graph and label A prime after the rotation that they're giving me. If I look at number 1 underneath, it says we want to rotate 90 degrees counterclockwise about the origin. This is huge. There's 3 important pieces to every rotation. First, they have to tell you how many degrees you're rotating. They have to tell you where you're rotating and what you're rotating around. Okay? Now, before we get started, I want us to just create a graph up top. Here is quadrant 1. Here is quadrant 2. Here is quadrant 3. And here is quadrant 4. Let's say here is my first point that I want to rotate. If I rotate from here to here, that would be 1 turn, and it would be 90 degrees. Again, here it is, just like on any graph that you guys would have. If I rotate it again, this would be a rotation of 180 degrees. If you guys remember from Unit 1, anytime I have a straight line, there's 180 degrees inside. And that's because 90 on the right plus 90 on the left, I turned another 90, gets me 180. That would be 2 turns. If I turned again, that would be another 90 degrees. That would be 3 turns for 270 degrees. And then to wrap it up, bring it home here, if I were to turn it one more time, to get back to where I started, that would be 1 more turn of 90 degrees, and that would be 360, just like a full circle. So underneath, when it's telling me that I'm gonna rotate 90 degrees, I know that's really telling me that I'm gonna turn my paper 1 time. That's 1 turn. And this will make sense in a minute. Counterclockwise tells me I'm turning back time. And then again around the origin, that means I'm just rotating around this point in the middle. Okay, and that's important because since we're rotating around the origin, you can use this trick that I'm about to go over with you right now. All right, here we go. So I'm gonna turn my paper 1 time to the left because I'm turning back time. It's counterclockwise. Everyone turn your paper with me 1 time to the left. Okay, now this is where it can get a little tricky. Forget what you knew 5 seconds ago. This is now your x-axis. This is now your y-axis. Look at it as a brand new problem. How do I plot this point? Well, it would really have the coordinates -2, +4. Because again, I'm looking at this as a brand new graph. So one more time, I have to go to the left 2, that's -2. Up 4, that's +4. So this would have the coordinates -2, +4. I'm gonna turn my paper back and I'm gonna write that down. A prime would have the coordinates of -2, +4, but I have to make sure I read those directions carefully. I have to graph and label A prime. So now I have to graph and label -2, +4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here we go, I graphed it and I am labeling it. All right, and I can only use this trick because I'm rotating around the origin. Let's look at the next one. I'm gonna rotate 180 degrees again about the origin. Now, if you notice here, this one's a little different because I said before you need 3 key pieces of information to rotate, and this only gave you 2 of them, and I'm going to explain why. If I rotate 180 degrees, if I look back up top, 180 is 1, 2 turns. So let me write that in. That's 2 turns. All right. And then again, about the origin just means I'm rotating around our middle point there, our center, the origin. If I turn my paper 2 times to the left, 1, 2, you guys agree that my paper is just upside down? I hope you do. All right, let me bring it back. If I turn my paper 2 times to the right, 1, 2, again, my paper is just upside down. So when it comes time to rotating 180 degrees, they don't have to say clockwise or counter because your paper is upside down either way. All right, so I'm gonna go 2 turns to the left, 1, 2, and again, I'm looking at this as a brand new graph. This is now my X, and this is now my Y. So if I wanna get to this point, I have to go to the left 4 units and down 2 units. That would be -4, -2. So I'm gonna turn my paper back and write that down. -4, -2. And again, I have to graph and label my A prime, which is now -4, 1, 2, 3, 4, -2, 1, 2. Graph it and label it. All right, so if we look at number 3, it says a rotation of 270 degrees. Let's highlight that. Counterclockwise about the origin. So again, because I'm rotating around the origin, we can use that trick of just turning our paper. 270 degrees, let's look up top again. That would be 1, 2, 3 turns. So let me come back down and write that in. So I'm gonna turn my paper 3 times. Counterclockwise would be to the left, right? I'm turning back time. So here I go. 1, 2, 3. Again, I'm looking at this as a brand new graph. Here's my X, here's my Y. How do I get to that point? Well, I have to go to the right 2 and down 4. So that's a +2, -4. So let's fill that in. +2, -4, and then I have to go back and plot it as well. So +2, 1, 2, -4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is my new A prime, okay? So sorry, we should have probably put A's here. So let's go back and do that quick. And then last but not least, we have our 360. So let's highlight that. I'm gonna rotate 360 degrees about the origin. Again, I'm rotating around the origin so I can use that trick of turning my paper. But if I remember correctly, 360 degrees is a full circle. So if I turn my paper a full circle, aren't I just getting back to where I started? I think so. So this is not only A, it's also A prime because I'm right back where I started. You would have to turn your paper 4 times to get 360. 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you turn it to 4, again, you're right back where you started. So what's A prime? It's 4, 2. It's the same point as A. All right. Now let's take everything we've learned and practice it on that next page. So here we go, example 1. Example 1 says, given triangle COW, so triangle cow, with vertices, C has the coordinates -1, 2, O has the coordinates -1, 5, and W has the coordinates -3, 3. Part A says to graph and label triangle cow. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm gonna circle A in blue because I'm gonna graph part A in blue. I have to graph and label triangle COW. So I'm going to graph C at -1, 2, -1, 2. Here is C. -1, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is O. And then -3, 1, 2, 3, +3, 1, 2, 3 is W. I'm going to grab my ruler and connect to make a really nice triangle here. You guys can do the same thing at home. Okay. So graph it. I graphed it, labeled it, I labeled it, COW. Now part B says to graph, label, and state the coordinates of C prime, O prime, and W prime. So that's going to be the image of COW after a rotation of 180 degrees about the origin. So there's a lot going on here. I'm going to actually grab a different color because this will be a different triangle to graph in. If you don't have more than one color, guys, that's fine. Just to make sure that you are labeling correctly as we go through this question. So here we go. I have to do 3 things. I have to graph, label, and state the coordinates of triangle COW. Now, triangle COW is the image, the coordinates of C prime, O prime, W. In order for me to get this triangle, it's going to be the image of COW, our pre-image, okay? And in order to do that, I would have to rotate my paper 180 degrees about the origin. So here we go. We just talked before about the origin. If I'm rotating around the origin right here in the middle, then I can use that shortcut, just turning my paper to figure out where C prime, O prime, W will be. So before I start turning my paper, I want to set myself up here. I have to find C prime, O prime, and W prime. These are going to be where my new coordinates are going to go. So again, I'm going to start at COW so that way I can find C prime, O prime, W prime. If I'm rotating 180 degrees, I know that that's going to be 2 turns. And it doesn't matter if it's 2 to the left or 2 to the right, we're going to end up at the same spot. So here I go. I'm going to go left, 1, 2. So now I'm upside down, but that's okay. This was originally C, now it's C prime. What's the coordinates? +1, -2. So I'm going to turn my paper back and write that down. It's +1, -2. Now I'm going to put myself upside down again, 2 turns. O, this is now O prime. So this is +1, -5. So I'm going to turn my paper back and write that down. +1, -5. And then one more time for W. I'm upside down. To get to W, this is going to be 3, right? +3, and then down -3. So again, this will be 3, -3. All right, I'm only turning my paper to help me figure out what those prime coordinates are going to be. But now that I have them, I'm going to graph it regularly. So I'm going to plot 1, -2, and that's going to be C prime. I'm going to plot 1, -5, 3, 4, 5, and that's O prime. And then I'm going to do 3, -3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and that's W prime. And then I'm going to grab my ruler, go ahead and connect to form my triangle here. Boom, boom, boom. And we are done. So I have my pre-image up top. Let me put the C down here. I have my pre-image up top, and I have my image down below. All right. And I know that I've rotated correctly. One way to check, to get from C to C prime, I would have to move 1, 2 quadrants to get there. 2 quadrants, 2 turns. So I know that we graphed this in the right spot. All right, example 2. I want you guys to at least try A and B on your own, and then we'll go over it and then finish up C and D together. All right, so here's what we should have had for parts A and B. Part A just asks you to graph and label triangle ABC, which we did. Again, we should underline that because I have to do 2 things, graph and label. Here we are. Part B asks us to graph and state the coordinates. We aren't just graphing, we also have to state the coordinates of triangle A prime, B prime, C prime after we reflect in the y-axis. So if you've learned from the other videos, if I'm reflecting in the y, you probably want to highlight the y-axis so it becomes a little bit clearer what to do. So if I'm on the right-hand side, I want to jump that pink line. I want to jump right over. So instead of going 1 to the right for C, I'm going to go 1 to the left for C prime. 4 to the right is A, 4 to the left is A prime, right? So on and so forth. So that's how I'm getting my A prime, B prime, C prime triangle, because I'm using ABC to get the prime. And again, it says state the coordinates, so I have to go back and do that as well. So I'm going to write that A prime had the coordinates -4, 0. I know that B prime had the coordinates -2, 3. And I know that C prime had the coordinates -1, 2. All right? And then let's work on C and D together. So part C, I'm going to do in a different color as well. Let's pick purple for this guy. So again, it says I have to graph and state the coordinates of A prime, B prime, A double prime, B double prime, and C double prime. And that's going to be the image of triangle A prime, B prime, C prime. And I'm going to do this after I reflect in the x-axis. So let me highlight everything that's important here. In order for me to get my double prime triangle, I'm going to use my prime to do it. And I'm going to reflect over the x-axis. All right? So here's the x-axis. I'm going to highlight it in yellow. Just like before, I'm jumping that yellow line. If you notice, if I'm starting at A prime, B prime, C prime to get my double, A prime is on the line of reflection. You guys have already learned that if I'm on the line of reflection, it doesn't move. I can't jump my yellow line here because I'm on the line. So this isn't just A prime, it's also A double prime. It's the same point, and that's okay. So now let's do B prime. Instead of going 1, 2, 3 up, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 down. Plot it and label it with my double prime. And then the same thing for C prime, I had to go up to. For C double prime, I have to go down to. And again, I have to label C double prime. I'm going to hit it with a ruler. Go ahead and connect. Boom, boom, boom. All right. Just color it in here for a minute. You guys don't have to do this unless you think it's helpful. And then again, I'm not just graphing, I also have to state the coordinates. So A double prime is -4, 0. B double prime is -2, -3. C double prime is -1, -2. So I should have my pre-image, prime, and my double prime. I have my pre-image, prime, and double prime. I am done. I'm good to go. All right, in part D, we want to determine and state a single transformation. Single means one. So we want to find one transformation where triangle A double prime, B double prime, C double prime is the image of triangle ABC. So if I want my double prime to be the image, that means this is where I want to end up. So that means my blue triangle, my ABC, that's where I'm going to start. So if I want to move from blue to purple, I'm going to think about a translation just to start, because for me, that's the simplest rigid motion, because a translation just means to move or to slide. So if I take my blue and I just slide it over to my purple, I can see that they're not exactly going to match up, so I know a translation wouldn't work here. If I wanted to try a reflection, Well, this question dealt with reflections, but I had to reflect twice. I had to go over the y-axis and then over the x. I only need one transformation, that's 2. So instead of me reflecting 2 times, I technically could have reflected 1 time right through the origin. And that's called a reflection in the origin. So this would have been one possible answer for part D. I can see I'm moving from C to C prime through the origin, B to B double prime through the origin, A to A double prime through the origin. All right, but then last but not least, we also learned about a rotation. So could I rotate to get from my pre-image to my image? Absolutely. In order for me to get from the first quadrant to the third quadrant, I would have to rotate 2 times. So I'm going to write that it's a rotation of 180 degrees because 180 represents 2 turns. And again, that would be rotating through the origin or about the origin. And you can double check if the rotation works or not by literally turning your paper 2 times and seeing if the points match up. So let's say I started with C. This was originally 1, 2. If I turn my paper 2 times for 180 and I just double check, well, now C double prime should be -1, -2. All right, again, when I rotate, I'm still on that pre-image where I started. So again, -1, -2 would be C double prime. Well, let's check. When I turn back, C double prime was -1, -2. So I know that the rotation of 180 works. Make sure you guys complete the homework. It's the last page, and you submit all of the pages completed.